And welcome to Working with Patron Accounts in Evergreen. Today we're going to be doing what I'm hoping is a fairly short and straightforward look at patron accounts. As usual, for those of you who have attended my webinars before, I encourage you to ask questions. If you have a rather lengthy question and you want to make sure that you have plenty of time to get it out without feeling like pressured that I'll move on past it before you finish typing everything, feel free to just raise your hand so I know to pause. And I will answer questions as we go when possible. And if there's anything that I'm not able to get through in the course of the actual webinar, then I'll be sure to get an answer to you afterwards, either via email or if it has kind of wide applicability, then I'll put it up on Basecamp as well. But we're going to go ahead and get started. And today we're going to be looking at several things related to accounts. We will talk about creating patron accounts. My guess is that most of the people in here have created an account before. So we won't go into lots of detail about everything in it, but we will talk about some of the more confusing aspects of kind of what's going on under the hood in terms of how different profile groups work and things like that. We will also be looking at some of the different functions that you can actually accomplish from a patron's account. So, obviously when you're checking materials out to somebody, you are doing that within their account. But there are actually a lot more functions that you can do from while logged into their account. So we'll talk about what those are. We will also talk a little bit about notes, alerts, and blocks and what some of the differences are in those in how they are created and how they function and some of the things that you can do with them. We will talk about grouping. We'll look briefly at the patron account in the OPAC and some of the things that patrons can do for their account so that if you have patrons who would benefit from some of these functions, you can share those. And then depending on time, we will get into bills. I intend to do a full webinar on billing and payments later on this year. I'm not sure exactly when that's going to be yet. It may be early spring, but we will go into a lot of detail about that in that particular webinar. So today, if we have some time after everything else, we will take a look at some of the basics. But if we don't go as deep as you'd like, or we don't answer all the questions that you have, just know that there will be an in-depth webinar on that topic at some point in the near future. So we're going to start by talking about creating new patron accounts. And as I said, I expect that a lot of the people in here are familiar with this process, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on when you're creating an account. So those of you who create accounts regularly are familiar with the concept that there are both required fields and suggested fields. Required fields are those that show up in yellow when you are actually filling out the account. And if you do not fill those fields in, you're actually not able to save the account. And for the most part, these are very, they make sense. They're fairly obvious as to why they're required, but some of them might be a little bit more confusing. So obviously barcode is a standard one. Those of you who make accounts regularly are aware that the username will fill in to match the barcode. You may not be aware that you can actually change that so that they are different. When creating patron accounts, we do not recommend that you do this. However, patrons themselves have the ability to change their username and can do that, which will allow them to log in to their OPAC account using that username rather than the barcode. That might be easier for some people who, maybe have trouble remembering the full barcode and have to look it up every time or have to save it on their computer. So just something to keep in mind as an option if that is something that you think you may have patrons who would benefit from that. Obviously, you want your first and last name. Those are required in order to create an account. One field that is not required, but that I highly recommend you use is middle name, because remember, when you're creating a patron account, it's not just an account at your library, it's an account across all of NC Cardinal. So, with millions of patrons out there, the more detailed and unique you can get in terms of that identifying information, the more likely it is that somebody who maybe has forgotten their card or has moved to a new service area, the more likely it is that somebody will be able to look them up accurately. So adding a middle name is always a good idea if a patron has that. Date of birth, of course, is required. Now, email address and daytime phone, I know that these two fields can create some problems sometimes because they are required, because not every patron has an email address or a phone number. So if you do have a patron who does not have that information, you can put, just a placeholder in these fields. They are not set up to require specific formatting, so you don't have to have a full 10-digit phone number for the phone number one. You can just put an X there or something like that. However, be aware that these are the places that Evergreen will look for notifications, at least the email is. So if you don't put an actual email address in there, make sure that you have settings otherwise set to not attempt to contact the patron via email, because obviously that email address is not going to work. Home library. Now there's some confusion about this sometimes. The home library is going to automatically set to whatever workstation you're logged in at. However, it can be changed. So if a patron has come into your library to set up an account, but they will regularly use a different branch in your system, you can switch it to a different branch if you'd like. If you're at some sort of outreach event, and so you're not actually even physically in the library and they're selecting the branch that they intend to use, you can do that regardless of what workstation is being reflected on your computer. Another thing to keep in mind is that the home library is not actually the setting that determines access to e-resources. And that's something that a lot of people have shown a confusion about in the past, is that they assume that the home library is how e-resource access is determined. That's actually going to come from the prefix on the patron's barcode. So the home library is something that's going to be used occasionally with determining policies and things like that. But even that is often not a necessary step in policy determination. So the home library really can reflect whatever statistically you'd like that patron to reflect as. So Leah mentioned that patrons who don't have email addresses, they've been putting in NA. You can continue to do that. The only thing is that you need to make sure that you are setting up notifications to go to a phone number then, and we will, in just a second, we're going to set up a patron account, and so we can look at that time. So it's fine to put NA for that. In fact, doing something consistently, having something that is always what you set for that is probably a good idea. Another thing to talk about, and we'll look at this in a little more detail in a minute, is the profile permission group. This determines a lot about how a patron is going to function in Evergreen, which policies will be hit when they attempt to check out materials or place holds, and some of the different ways that the account itself will function. So there are a number of permission groups, and we'll go through them in just a moment. And then the address, you actually have the ability to set both a physical and a mailing address, and they don't have to match. So we'll look at how to do that. Some other fields to be aware of that are not required. The juvenile flag, this is something that's going to be set automatically based on the birth date that you add. Keep in mind that it will not automatically reset when the patron passes the threshold for when they would no longer be a juvenile. So that's something that you may need to regularly go in and remove. Guardian does not in any way link an account, a juvenile account, to a guardian's account. It's simply informational, but if you do have a local policy where you need a guardian listed, this is where you'd put that. Patron preferred language. There are options for sending out notifications in languages other than English. If your library is not currently using these options, I would still suggest that you select a patron preferred language if you have a patron whose preferred language is not English, because if in the future you begin using those notifications, then you'll already have your patron set up to receive them. So if you have a patron whose home or whose native language is not English and they'd like to set something else, go ahead and set that for them. It won't make any difference right now if you're not using those notifications, but it could in the future. We'll talk about default hold pickup locations and how you can set those differently than the home library, and also hold notice preferences. And then, of course, if your library utilizes stat cats, you will, sometimes those stat cats are required and sometimes they're not. So that's something that if you attempt to save it and you haven't filled in a stat cat that is required, you'll be prompted to do so. So let's actually take a look at the patron registration page. And let's go through this process quickly. So I'm going to go into register a patron under circulation. And so you can see that all of my required fields are in yellow. Now I can come up here and I can click on required fields and I can basically condense this down to primarily just give me those required fields. Now you'll see that there are some things here that are not in yellow that are showing up anyway. And that's because these are things that in some instances, depending on what I have selected in other places, may become required. I can also look at suggested fields, and so this is going to add a few extras. I typically just look at all fields when I'm creating something, but that is a personal preference. Now barcode, I can create my barcode here. Obviously, when you're creating barcodes, you're going to be scanning a barcode. So that's going to go in here. Barcodes need to be unique, and they not only need to be unique amongst currently active barcodes, but they need to be unique amongst any barcode that has ever existed in NC Cardinal. This usually isn't an issue because, of course, you have your library's prefix and you have barcodes that are attached to those cards that are created for you from your vendors. So it's unlikely that you're ever going to be scanning a barcode that has existed somewhere else. But be aware that even if a patron has been deleted, the fact that they had a barcode, that barcode will remain flagged in Evergreen and unable to be recreated to attach to a different account. So just be aware of that. Now, after I have scanned my card, it's automatically going to fill in the username. And like I said, that's going to match the barcode. The password is automatically going to match, depending on what your library settings are, either the last 4 digits of the barcode or the phone number. Since I haven't put the phone number in yet, and my barcode does not have digits, I'm just being given a random password here. I'll go ahead and put in my patron's name, and in order to ensure that if she ever needs to be looked up, we find the exact right person, I want to make sure I add that middle name as well. And then I'm going to come on down here to the date of birth. Now I do have a calendar widget, and I can get through this calendar kind of quickly by clicking first up here on the month and then on the year. And so then I can quickly scroll backwards to the year that I need. Now, if I had put in, for example, 2020, my juvenile flag is automatically set. I'm going to remove it back to 1980, and that juvenile flag becomes unset. I do not have to put a guardian in here, but I'm going to. This will not attach the account to anyone to this account or do any kind of grouping. It's simply informational. Now, up until recently, I'd say somewhere at a time in the last year, most libraries were using a driver's license as an identification type and putting that driver's license number in here. But updates from the state Department of IT have asked that we no longer include that type of personally identifying information in this system. So you may still be checking driver's licenses as your main source of identification, but we ask you to no longer put those driver's license numbers here in this primary identification field. So you can still leave license as the type, but we want to keep this field blank. Now we'll talk about photos in just a second. For the patron preferred language, there are a number of languages that are available at this time. If you do have a large population of patrons who speak a different language, then you can contact us about potentially adding that to this list. But if I wanted to, I could go ahead and set a preferred language here. And then in the future, if I started sending out those notifications in Spanish, this patron would automatically be looped into the recipient list for those notifications. Now, email address, I can put in an email address here, or I can put in something, something generic in order to allow this to save if a patron does not have an email address. If I do that, then I want to make sure that I'm not checking email checkout receipts by default. And when I come down here to my user settings, I want to make sure that hold notices are not going to email. So that's what I need to do if I have a patron without an email address. Daytime phone. So again, if a patron does not have a phone number, I could put in something random here, something generic. I can also, in that case, though, I would also want to make sure that I'm not sending notifications to a phone number. If you have a juvenile patron, obviously, who does not have their own phone number, your local policy would determine whether or not you use their guardian's phone number. Home library, this is automatically filled in based on my workstation, which you can see up here in the top right. I can change that if I'd like to. Now the profile group, we'll talk about the profile groups in a moment. I'm just going to go ahead and set this to one of the groups that's available. The profile group you choose will work with your library settings to determine the expiration date. For the most part, that's going to be 3 years. However, if you switched it to a limited profile, it's going to be 1 year. So you see I had an expiration date of 2027 that's now moved down to 2025. So that expiration date can be changed. So, if I wanted it to be 2026, then I could do that. But I am just going to keep that as a standard 3 year. It is automatically set to active, and I cannot imagine a scenario where you would not want to keep this. And I will point out that when you are deleting patrons or purging, we do prefer if you deactivate them prior to purging. It helps with some flags in the underlying system. So just something to keep in mind. Now, if this is going to be an account with that'll be grouped with other accounts, you can set it as a lead account here, and then actually at the end when you save, you can save and clone and make the next account in that group. Now under user settings, because I do not have an email address, I want to make sure that email is not listed here for hold notices. I want to make sure it's either phone or SMS. If this was still email, then I don't need to have anything here for the default phone number. As soon as I select phone as my hold notice default, I have this field becomes yellow. Even if I have something in my daytime phone up above, I still need to fill something in here, even if it's exactly the same. My default hold pickup location, I can keep this blank. I can also set it to, wherever the patron tells me their default hold location is going to be. Either way, the patron can select this manually at the time a hold is placed. So even if I choose PAC right now, if this patron places a hold in the future and wants to pick it up at South Asheville, they'll be able to make that determination at the time. Now, if I chose SMS, then I would need to put in a phone number here. Once again, even if it is the same as the phone number listed up here, I still would need to put it in again. And I would have to choose the correct carrier. If you have a patron who has a carrier who's not listed in here, you can submit a ticket to request it. We may not be able to add it, but we'll do our best. And then you can determine, does this patron want the courtesy notices that they'll receive at this either email address or phone number? The default is that yes, they do, but if your patron says they do not, you can turn that off. Now down here, I did say that you can set both a mailing and physical address. And so the default is to have both of them set and both of them match. I can set them differently. So like if I have a patron with a PO box, I can uncheck physical and I can put in their PO box number, and all of that. And then I can come down here and click new address to put in their actual physical address. And I would select physical here, and then I would put in the rest of this at this time. So I can make those different. I can make them match and have them both listed. I can only list one. If they don't have a physical address, but they do have a place where they can receive mail, I can mark that. And then, of course, at the bottom are the statistical categories that your library uses. If your library doesn't use any, you don't need to do anything about this. If your library does, then you'll need to know whether or not they are required. But that's the process essentially of registering a patron. If this patron, if I had a family come in and all of them were going to want it to be grouped together, I could save and clone and create the next patron. The only thing that will be cloned if I do that is the address. Everything else will need to be filled in again. But what it will do is automatically group those accounts together. So if you have a situation where like roommates come in where they have the same address, but they don't, they're not a parent and child, then you actually would not want to save and clone because you don't want those accounts grouped together. So just something to keep in mind with this save and clone button. Let's talk a little bit more about permission groups. So the main permission groups, of course, are adult and juvenile. Many of our libraries also have a teen permission group. Beyond that, a common one to have would be the adult limited and juvenile limited. Some libraries use this to, for pending patrons who maybe have not yet verified an address. Their set is limited until they verify that. They may have it for patrons who may be unhoused or something like that, where they want to make sure that they are updating the account regularly, because of course these limited accounts do expire yearly as opposed to the standard 3 years. And then of course limited may have different thresholds and sort of circuits. In some circulations, it may actually not allow circulation at all. What that account does may be very different than what a standard adult or juvenile account would allow. In addition to the limited, some of the other special patron types, the internet card, not all of our libraries use this, but this basically allows you to create an account for someone to access your e-resources without being able to check anything out. And so this might be something that you provide to, to somebody who does not live in your service area and they have an NC Cardinal account in another library, but for whatever reason you have granted them access, you would like to grant them access to your e-resources, you can do that by creating an internet account. And we do recommend that you group that then with their existing circulating account at the other NC Cardinal library where they have an account. But now, of course, a regular adult account is going to have access to e-resources, so you don't need to make an internet card for one of your regular patrons. But if you have an external patron coming in who would like to access your e-resources, that's how you can do that. Some libraries do have teen accounts. Outreach accounts, there is some confusion about this and different libraries use this differently. Typically, this would be for patrons who experience all of their library circulation and holds and everything without actually coming into the physical library. So some libraries may use this for bookmobile patrons. A lot of libraries use this for like homebound patrons and other patrons who may not be able to come into the physical library. So you can set different circulation policies and things like that. If you have homebound patrons that you'd like to be able to check items out for, say, 5 weeks at a time instead of a more standard 3 weeks, you can set special policies for outreach patrons, and then you can make those patrons outreach, and those policies will then apply to them. So the outreach permission group is really useful in that sense. The institutional group, this is used in 2 different ways. It can be used either for external institutions or internal. Externally, this may be that, a daycare in your town has an account where they can regularly check out books to use in the daycare, or, maybe an assisted living facility or something like that. Internal institutional accounts may be your youth services department. Since you cannot use your staff login accounts to place holds and check out items, you can create institutional accounts that would allow your department to do that for programming and things like that. And once again, this is useful if you want to have specialized circulation policies just for those types of accounts. So if, the daycare down the street checks out items and you want to give items to them for a month at a time, you can set special circulation policies just for institutional accounts to allow that. And then finally, staff accounts. This causes a great deal of confusion. Staff accounts are staff circulation accounts. These are not the same as the staff accounts you use to log into Evergreen. So that would be a staff login account. A staff circulation account allows basically a patron who is a staff member to borrow items following specialized policies. So if you are a library that charges overdue fees and you'd like to allow your staff to not accrue any fines, you can set up special circulation policies with no fines attached and apply them to staff accounts. You can also use this for things like if your cataloger would like to be able to place holds on items to come to cataloging when they're returned, a staff account for the cataloger can be created. So it can be used very similarly to institutional accounts. And some libraries use institutional, others use staff. And so it's really kind of an internal decision what you want that to look like. So these are the patron permission groups. They may not all be in use at your library, but if you have any questions about any of them, let me know. Otherwise, we'll move on to talking about photos. So we have had some questions and some suggestions about allowing photos, and that is actually possible. You cannot upload the photos into Evergreen, but if you do have a secure place where they can be stored online, so a secure online server, you can basically take the URL of that storage space and put it into Evergreen. So I could, for example, take a URL of a photo, and I should have one saved in here. And then when I save this account and I go into the patron, that photo is going to show up in her account. So let's go take a look and you'll see what that looks like. So I can see now over here on the side, I now have a photo of the patron that shows up. So if that's something that your library is interested in doing, it is possible, but you do need to have a secure place that you can store those photos because Evergreen does not provide photo storage. It just provides the ability to link out to a photo that is stored externally. We talked about saving and cloning, so I believe that brings us to the end of talking about creating patron accounts. Are there any questions about that process or anything having to do with profile permission groups or anything like that? All right, well, let's go ahead and start talking about the circulation and hold functions that you can do from a patron account. And in order to do that, we're going to meet a patron named Sarah Smith. And Sarah and I go way back. She's a longtime Evergreen library user. And she tends to have some messiness going on in her account. So let's take a look at what she's got going on right now. So basically, I see a few things that stick out to me right away. I see that she's got some alerts. I see this stop sign that's telling me that I've got to explore some things before I move forward with a transaction. So if she were to come up to the desk and scan her card to check items out, this is what I would see first when that happened because this stop sign is not allowing me to pop straight into the checkout tab. We'll come back to some of this later. But for now, I want to go ahead and take a look at the items out and holds tabs. So within the patron account, I can get a list of everything that she has out right now, and I can see some information about it. I can see how many renewals she has left. I can see due dates. But there are also a number of actions that I can do from here. So a couple of the circulation functions that I wanted to point out is that I can print an item receipt, which really functions as the ability to print a list of all of her currently checked out items. So if I were to select all of her items here and come up here to my actions menu, I can choose print item receipt, and this is going to print a list of everything that I've selected. So if a patron comes up and asks for a list of everything they have checked out so they can go home and find everything, you can do that for them from here. I can also edit due dates. So, if you have a situation where the library is going to be closed on a specific date, you can come and edit due dates manually. Generally speaking, in a situation like that, you're going to want to edit the library's dates, and that's going to automatically change those due dates. But if you have a situation where it's really going to only apply to a couple of people, you can do that in here. You could also, if you have a patron who says, I'm going to be in the hospital, I know my books are due on the 22nd, but I don't get released until the 23rd. Is there any way we can extend it? If that's something that your library is comfortable doing, then you can do that here. So you can do just sort of a one-off. You can do it for everything. You can do it for just one or two items. You can also mark items. So damaged, missing, lost, claims returned, or claims never checked out. So if you mark an item damaged or lost, that is going to automatically charge the patron for that item based on your settings. If you mark an item claims returned or claims never checked out, it's going to basically put that into a special circulation section, and that count will stay on the patron's account until you move forward with either determining that that book is indeed lost and you are going to charge the patron for it, or you recover the book. Missing will basically knock the item into a missing status, but it won't charge the patron for it. So, if I were going to take this book here that has no renewals left and come to my actions menu and mark it lost, then you'll see that my bill amount went up to $25. And now that book is showing up as lost in my other special circulations tab. In this tab, I also have a book that is claims returned. So over here on my left, if I scroll down, I can see the number of lost items this patron has, and I can see the number of claims returned, regardless of where I am in her account. Some other things that I can do from here, I can renew. So obviously in most cases, items will auto renew, but if you have a reason, if a patron maybe has a reason that they want to renew a little bit early, you can renew. You've got a couple of different ways that you can do this. So I can select a book and I can choose to renew it, and it's just going to automatically renew it. And it's going to give me an, oh, it won't in this case because she exceeds fines and lost count now, but I'm going to go ahead and force that action. So it's gone ahead and renewed it and given me a new due date. Now I can also do the same thing where I take that book and I go in to renew it. Nope, sorry. And I go into renew it with a specific due date. So, if I had a situation where I was going to allow a patron, maybe just this once, the opportunity to do, one extra week on their renewal or something like that, I could come in here and I could set my renewal date to just be until next week. Now, of course, in this case, it's not due till September 5th, so I'm actually making it due significantly sooner than it is, but for the sake of showing. And so that allows me to basically extend the due date a specific amount of time rather than the standard renewal period. For whatever reason, you may want to do that. And then, of course, I can add billing, and I think this is a really useful tool. So if I select a book and I come up here to my actions menu and choose add billing, let's say you have a patron who comes back and they've torn the Mylar cover. They don't need to pay to replace the whole book, but you want to charge them just for the cover, and you want that charge to be on their account connected to the circulation, so you know what they were charged for, what book they were charged for. Then you can come in here and you can charge them for just that damage. And you can put a note in just saying what the damage was and how much it cost and everything, and submit that bill. And so this book is still here. It's still checked out to her. Nothing about that has changed. And we've added $5 to her bills. If we do come into the bill, now we can see this miscellaneous charge for $5. And if we open it up, we can see that it's for a ripped Mylar cover. So even once that's been paid and the transaction has been completed, we still have that record of why this $5 charge was put on her account. So those are the general things that you can do in terms of circulation functions from the patron's account. There are also some things that you can do in terms of holds functions. And so if I go into the hold tab in here, obviously I can place a hold for her. She has a ridiculous amount of holds because I was testing some stuff in here earlier. But I can obviously place a hold from here, and I can get detailed views about each of the holds. I can also see, when holds were placed, if they've been captured, when they were captured, what their status is, how many items could fulfill that hold. I can also come up here to this little caret menu, and I could add things like, where is it? And add queue position, so I can actually see where the patron is in the queue right from her account. And so this is helpful, if a patron comes in and wants to see how long their wait's going to be. Some of the actions I can take from here, if I selected an item and I come up here to the actions menu, I can edit the pickup library. So let's say a patron had intended to pick something up at their standard home library, but now they have a new job all the way across town and they want to be able to pick up their holds there. They can edit those even after they've placed them. I don't believe you can edit that once something's actually in transit, or even if you can, then it's going to take a lot longer. Let's do this one instead. So I could change this to, South Asheville. So you can't necessarily tell exactly how long a wait will be, but you can see where somebody is in the position in the queue by coming to this little drop-down menu, this caret menu up here. And queue position is not normally visible, but you can make it visible. So prior to this, you couldn't see it. When you come here, I see that it's queue position is this kind of orangey yellow color with an X. I can select that and that'll bring that up in the grid so I can see what position they are in the queue. And I can also see how many potential items there are, which can kind of give me a little bit of an idea of how long the wait will be. The queue is for the entire Cardinal system. So, anything within resource sharing. Yes, but if it is under resource sharing, the queue will be a little bit uh, isn't necessarily reflective of reality. So the question is you can see the queue position even when 6 months age hold protection is on. So if I have a hold on an item that my library does not own, that is under 6 month hold protection, I'm in the queue for that. I will continue to be skipped over to receive that. So even if I move up to first in line, I'll be skipped until that 6 months is over. So the queue position may not be reflective of reality when there's age hold protection. So, and there are, a few other situations that may make queue position not function exactly in order. So an opportunistic capture is going to prioritize a local patron over a patron that the item would have to go in transit for. So that could skip somebody up to the top of a queue. So just be aware that queue position isn't set in stone necessarily, but it can at least give you an idea. So you could, the patron can come in and ask where they were for this book, and you could say, well, you're 42nd in line and there are 153 items. So, I can't do that type of math to tell you about how long that would be. But I guess what, probably about 9 weeks or so. Yeah. So when you have these high demand books, you can be pretty high in the queue. This one down here, 189th in line. Honestly, I'm like 200 and something in my library for this one, so this is pretty good. Um, so yeah, yes, that's going to have some very high numbers right now. Um, yeah, so just be aware that queue position is not, you know, 100% accurate, but it more gives you just a little bit of an idea. Um, you do have a couple of other things that you can do from this screen. So you can edit your pickup library. We looked at that. You can also edit your notification preferences. So if a patron comes in and says, hey, I want to get my preferences or my notifications from texts from now on, you can go ahead and change that on their existing hold. So you can come in here to edit notification settings. And you can choose what you want to edit. Do you want to just update the phone number? They already get phone calls for it, and you just want to change the phone number, or do you want to switch them from email to phone number? So you just would check the box for what you'd like to change, and you can change that from in here. Now, there are several different things you can do with hold dates, and so we'll go through these. Some of them are more useful than others, but if I come in here to edit hold dates, I can edit the activate date, the request date, the expire date, and the shelf expire date. Now, the activate date, if a hold has been suspended and the patron, maybe had one activation date that they wanted and they'd like to change that, you can change it by doing this. If the hold has not yet been suspended and the patron would like to suspend it, you can do that by setting the activation date. And that's useful because if you just suspend the hold once it's already been placed, you're suspending it indefinitely until it is manually reactivated. So this allows you to actually do that suspension with an activation date that you do when you place a hold. So, if I set this activation date and submit that. Now this hold is suspended with that set activation date. Whereas if I just come to the action menu and I suspend the hold, all that has happened is now it's suspended and I'll have to go back in and manually reactivate it when the patron says they want to. So if you do have a situation like that, then changing the date is a preferred method over just doing a normal suspension. Now I'm going to look at some other dates as well. There's really no reason I can think of to change a hold request date, so that's probably not going to have any impact in general, but it's one of the options here. The hold expire date, this can be useful if you have a patron who has placed a hold on something where they're number 200 in line and they say, hey, if I don't have it in 3 months, I'm just going to buy it. Then you could do a thing where you change, normally the expiration date for a hold is 1 year from the date it's set. You could change this to, November 22nd. And then when that date rolls around, if they haven't gotten it yet, it's automatically going to just expire for them and move into a canceled status. So that's something that you could do. You probably want to make some sort of note about that so that the patron remembers that's what they requested when the time comes. But that's an option. Now, the shelf expire date, basically once a book has been received and gone onto the hold shelf, it'll stay there for 1 week. After that time, it'll expire, and then you'll need to clear it and move it on to the next person in line or put it back in, send it back to its owning library or reshelve it. If you have a patron who says, I'm actually out of town this week, is there any way I could have one extra day because I'll be back basically the day after it's expired, but I'll come pick it up right away. You can do that for them if that is something that your library will allow by adding a day. We would ask that you not do this very often, that you not make a huge practice of it, because of course we want resource sharing to continue moving smoothly, but there may be a one-off situation where you feel that it's warranted. And so this is how you could do that. So we talked about activating and suspending. We saw a manual suspension. The manual activation is just the other end of that. When a patron contacts you and says, I'm ready for this hold now, you can go in and manually activate it as well. This one is kind of cool. If you have a patron who, has placed a hold and then it turns out it was the wrong thing, you can actually transfer that hold to another title. So let's say this patron came in and said, oh, I didn't want Verity. I wanted codename Verity. You can search for the actual item that they wanted in the catalog. And then you can come into the record for that item and come up here to this Mark For button and mark Title Hold Transfer. And then you can come back into the patron's holds and you can select the thing that they'd like to change and come up here to the Actions menu and transfer to marked title. And so now instead of being 29th in the queue for Verity, she is going to be first in the queue for codename Verity. And so, obviously you can simply cancel the hold and then go place the other hold, but this actually will retain a little bit of the queue information. It won't be a one-to-one, if she was 29th, she won't necessarily be 29th in the next one, but it will put her in the queue based on the date the title was originally requested. So she won't necessarily lose progress that she's made waiting. So again, this is something that you kind of want to use with caution and discretion because you don't want to mess up too much with resource sharing. But in some situations, it might be really helpful. You can also mark an item damaged while it is on hold. Just be aware that that will cancel the hold. So, if you get an item in and you see that it's damaged, and so rather than making it available to the patron it has come in for, you want to return it to the library and say, we can't check this out. It's too damaged. But be aware that doing so in that process will cancel the hold. So, probably better to do that in a different method. And you can also retarget holds. So if for whatever reason you no longer want this captured hold to well, no, you don't want to do it with a captured hold. You want to do it with one where the item has been, I don't have one that's in the right state for that, but see, I could go this and I could find another target. And so it's basically going to retarget the hold. So probably not something you want to do in terms of resource sharing, but if you have a local patron who's placed a hold on a local item, and for whatever reason that local item you don't want that local item to go to fulfill the hold, then you can retarget it from the patron's account. All right, so those are circulation and hold functions from the patron's account. We're going to talk briefly about notes, alerts, and blocks, but are there any questions about any of that stuff that we've covered? Well, if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in and we'll continue to address them as we move forward. But just a quick overview of notes and messages. There is some confusion sometimes about the difference between all of these. Basically, a note is simply informational. It's not necessary for people at the desk to be aware of prior to completing a transaction, and it's not going to have any impact on the account itself. So it's not going to do any kind of blocking. It can't be made visible to patrons. So if it's simply a thing of like, you want to let a patron know something, you want to send a patron a message via their account in the OPAC, you can do that with a note. Alerts are similar to notes in that they do not block the account. They don't have any sort of impact on the account's functionality, but they will display in red on the left-hand side of the account. So here in Sarah's account, we see that she's got several alerts. this is this type of alert. It's basically something that has not stopped her from using the account, but it's something that we want the staff to see when she comes in to actually check something out. And then blocks are also, they're something that can be made visible to the patron. There are two types of blocks. There are blocks that are put on manually, and then there are blocks that happen as a result of a transaction, and those are by far more common. Blocks obviously block circulation and hold privileges. So you can see that Sarah has a couple of blocks. We saw them appear because they appeared when when we marked that item lost. So now patron exceeds max lost item threshold and patron exceeds fine threshold. So both of these are blocks that appeared automatically as the result of a transaction. You can put blocks on manually. So if you have a reason to block a patron that is not related to a circulation transaction, but for some reason you want to make it so that patron is not able to use their card for some period of time, then you can apply that block manually as well. Let's take a look at the Notes tab, and you can kind of see what this looks like in action. So over here, the penalty name, it's a little bit of a misnomer because most of them really aren't penalties. But if it is something that happened as a result of transactions, then you're going to see that here. You're going to see what that actual, triggering, what that trigger was. So when she exceeded loss count, she got this one. When she exceeded fines, she got this one. An alert note means that it was done manually and it's an alert type. A silent note means that it was done manually and it's just a regular note, which means it's not going to appear here in red. That's basically what silent means. It doesn't, show up brightly for staff to see. So, this could be something that you just want the patron to see or something like that. Like there's a book sale coming up. If it is something that is visible to the patron, then if they have read it, you cannot delete it until they mark it deleted. So a patron can delete their messages, and at that point you can delete it. But if they have read it and not deleted it, there's nothing you can do with it until that has happened. So we'll look at the patron account in just a moment, and you'll see these from the patron side of things. In order to clear one of these that happened as a result of a circulation transaction, you have to clear the underlying issue. So in order to clear this, you'll have to clear the bill. In order to clear a regular alert, you can just select it, and then you can remove it or archive it. And this has not been working well for me lately, but I'm going to try. Yeah, I'm getting the same issue I've had before, which only happens in dev, and it only happens when I've logged in kind of a weird way. So you shouldn't see that. But basically, you have the ability to clear a note or to archive a note. Once it's archived, you can see it down here. You can do kind of a range to search for old notes as well. To create new notes, you can just click Create Note. You can make notes visible at 3 different levels. You can make them visible throughout Cardinal, throughout your system, or at a specific branch. So depending on what that note is will determine, who you want to see it. You can make it patron visible by clicking that button, and then you'll see whether or not the patron has read it here. It'll say unread until the patron reads it, then it'll say read. If the patron then deletes it on their end, it'll say deleted. And then you can choose the type of note that you're creating. A regular note with no blocks, an alerting note, which will show up in red but will not block, or a blocking note. There is also a note to forgive fines. That's a little bit separate. We can talk about that. We'll talk about that in the billing and payment webinar that I'll do in the future. You will need to fill in your initials as well. So that is the basics of notes. Are there any questions about that? We've only got about 5 minutes left, and I definitely want to hit patron groups. If there are questions, please feel free to ask them. I'm happy to dig into them after the session is ended, and either you can hang out with me while I do, or I can send the answers via Basecamp or email. So let's take a look at hold groups. One thing I wanted to show you is over here on the left, if I scroll down, I can see this section here for group fines. This lets me know that somebody else in Sarah's group owes money. So, if she comes up to the desk, you can let her know, depending on what your library's policy for this is, you can let her know that someone else in the group owes money and ask her if she'd like you to, figure out who it is or anything like that. In order to view the group members, I can come here to the Other tab, and I can choose Group Member Details. And I can see that the other person in Sarah's group is what is probably her daughter, Sally, and that she does owe $48. So I could select her, and from the Actions menu, I could retrieve her account to look into that more. I can also, from this page, add an additional patron. So I can put in the barcode of the person I'm adding and move them into the group. And so they would show up in here. I could also remove somebody from the group. So let's say once one of Sarah's children is no longer a juvenile patron, you want to remove them from the group, I could select them and click Actions and remove the selected patron from the group. I can also add fill out this group simply by doing a save and clone. If I come into the Edit tab up here, I can do a save and clone directly from Sarah's account. And so I can go in and create a new account. Let's say she has another child. And then I can fill all this out, and that will automatically add this new patron to that group directly from Sarah's account. Groups will not block other group members. So like the fact that Sally has bills did not block Sarah until Sarah had her own bills. It's more informational and allows you to easily move between family groups, but it does not actually impact one account or another. So just something to keep in mind. Typically, we ask that you only create groups that include one parent or guardian and then however many children. We don't want adult accounts grouped together for privacy reasons, so one adult per group. As I said, blocking one account will not block anyone else in the group. Patrons also cannot view group member details in the OPAC. So you can easily move into other group members in the staff client, but patrons would not be able to do that. Speaking of the OPAC, let's look at that real quick and then we'll finish up. So if I were to go into If I were to go into the OPAC, I could log into a patron's account here under My Account. And the patron would just want to put in their barcode. I think in that case, that's probably fine. Really, this is the privacy issue is something that I think we allow libraries, to have their own local policies about that. But if you'd like, we can check in with Benjamin on that and see if there's any guidance in any of our policies about that particular situation, Shauna. So I'll make a note to check on that. Oh no. Well, my Google just died on me. Let me pull it back up, hopefully. Okay, so we are in Sarah's account in the OPAC. And a couple of things I wanted to show you in here. First of all, messages. This is what those messages look like in Sarah's account. So she can read them, open them up, and actually take a look at them. After reading them, she can delete them. And then they'd be able to be archived or removed in the staff client. She can also mark them as unread. So she's read them, but she, for whatever reason, does not want that to reflect on her account. She can mark it unread as well. And the other thing I wanted to show you was one of the things we get lots of questions about, which is how patrons can save their reading history. So that's something that patrons do have to opt into. If this is something that you have patrons that you feel would benefit from this, you can tell them that at the point they create their account so that they can start recording that history immediately. So if I come in here to my account up here at the top, I guess I could have done it from where I was. I want to go into account preferences, and I want to come in here to search and history preferences. So currently, I do not have keep history of checked out items checked because a patron does have to opt into it. So the default is that it is unchecked. I can check that. I can also check keep history of holds and save this. And now every time Sarah checks out a new item, this will show up in her history. So if I go into her account in the OPAC or the staff pack, and let's go ahead and check out one of these holds to her. All right, and then I'm just going to check it right on in. And if I come back into her account in the OPAC, I can come into her items checked out tab and I can move into checkout history. And I can see that this item that has been checked out and returned is showing up in her checkout history. And that will continue to be updated as she continues to check out materials. She does have the ability to delete things from this list as well. So that is a question that I know people ask a lot. Unfortunately, there's not a way that you can set that up to be viewable by staff, but you can help your patrons to do that at the time that they create an account if that is something they're interested in. Now, I don't think, considering it's 3:02, that we're going to get into billing today. But like I said, I will be doing a full webinar on just that topic in the future. So I want to thank everybody for being, okay, and Benjamin has said in the chat that if there are no privacy concerns at the library or for the patrons, then it's not a problem if adults are linked. So that would be completely fine, Shauna. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here. I am happy to hang out for a few minutes if there are some questions, but otherwise also feel free to ask them in Basecamp or email me. And I appreciate a willing audience with great questions as usual.